This is the Human AI Experience, a space for creative minds shaping the future, empowering you with the right tools, insights, and real-world stories to harness AI and elevate your creative work.
So on today's show, we have a special guest, Dr. Federica Fornaciari. Welcome to the podcast. Could you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me, first of all. I am a communication scholar. I have been studying communication for over 20 years and doing research in communication around privacy, security, media, and technology. Media representation. I currently work at National University where I lead the Master in Strategic Communications. Well, we have a fully online offering there. And when I'm not teaching, my research again revolves around digital identity, artificial intelligence, privacy, media representation, and how all these topics intersect, all these areas and fields intersect in communication.
Awesome. Sounds exciting.
Yeah. And then you have such a rich, like, an interdisciplinary background. What originally drew you to the crossroad of media, technology, and communication?
Yeah, it really started, I believe, with a deep interest in social justice and media representation. Um, Going back, I grew up in Italy, and even as a teenager, I was struck by how women in politics were often discussed more for their looks than their ideas. Still today, in many media outlets. So, in a way, that was, I think, my first real media literacy moment where, I didn't have a name for that back then, but that's what triggered my curiosity about how the media can shape what we see. They can shape who we trust, how we understand the world, and the language that we have to talk about it. And that curiosity, I guess, deepened when I started studying the intersection of media and technology, and when I started realizing how much power these tools can have, not just to represent reality, but to create it. And so, for me, I guess, in a way, media, technology, and communication are intersecting spheres. They are not separate. They are intertwined systems that shape our identities, our sense of self, our politics, and our society, the way we interact with each other. So I was trying to better understand how we can make those systems more ethical, more equitable, and more human-centered for, a better society. We still haven't figured that out yet, I think.
How your experience, like, across academia and media shaped the way that you understand today's tech-driven communication landscape?
Yeah, those are two very, again, important systems that have to work together, I think, because academia, on the one hand, taught me how to sit back, slow down, and ask questions. The media taught me that most people, unfortunately, don't have the privilege or the incentive or the time to do that. So, I've learned to live in that in between space where the depth of rigor of academic thinking meet the speed and the urgency of communication, of real world communication. And if you think about the technology landscape, the speed there, doesn't can't wait for peer review, but that doesn't mean that we should sacrifice reflection. So what academia gave me is, I believe, a strong foundation, an ability to analyze systems, to recognize patterns, to understand the historical and ethical dimensions behind what might look like sudden innovation. And on the other hand, what media taught me is how we can translate those insights quickly and clearly, and in a way that resonates with a broader audience, right? So uh, if you see that big picture in that way, I think that one system without the other isn't enough. Um, and with my work, I really try to bridge that gap. I try to take that kind of thinking that happens in academia and make it useful to the fast moving conversations that happen in tech, in the media, in policy making even. And in those realms, I think that the most meaningful insight doesn't come from the loudest headlines in the news or the newest tools. It's really coming from those people who ask the deeper questions, such as, who's being left out? What are the values embedded in these tools or in this conversation? So, in a way, that's the lens that I try to bring to the discourse, the narratives around AI and communication. It's, I think, is a very important challenge to work in that direction now.
Yeah, yeah, definitely it is. And I feel that everything's happening so fast. Like the communication need to be super fast, and then
Mhm.
the academia give this, as I said, the background of reflection, of questioning things. And nowadays, look like the even journalists, they're just like fast. They don't check the facts. So we're living in a kind of a unbalanced world. So
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's it's a fascinating time for sure to be in the communication field, but it's also, schizophrenic as well, and
yeah,
you have to be bipolar in a way.
I guess when social media came along, it really distorted and we weren't prepared, I guess, biologically speaking, to adapt so fast to this level of communication all of a sudden 24/7 in your pocket,
Mhm,
and with all these mechanisms, I guess, for you to be glued to the screen. Everything is like endless
mhm,
scroll that tries to keep you engaged, because that, of course, somebody's making money for keeping your eyeballs glued to the screen.
mhm,
But that was already rapidly advancing, right? And tech just flows and evolves in a pace that we're not, trained to do, to keep up. And with AI, this is basically exponentially growing. It's much faster now. So I just want to hear your thoughts in how do you think this is, AI on top of media, social media, is changing the way we see stories, and how they are framed and how do we understand them.
It goes straight to the heart of my research around media frames and media literacy. So, when we talk about framing at its core, framing is about emphasis and selection, right? So, we look at what's included in a story, what's left out, and how the story is structured, what language is used to talk about that story. So, frames give people not just something to look at, but a way to make sense of what they're seeing and not seeing, right? So the frames, in a way, tell us what matters. They tell us who's to blame, who's trustworthy, what's at stake. And because of that, framing is a very powerful tool, obviously. It helps people to understand reality if used ethically and purposefully, but it also has the power to distort reality. It's a very blurry line there, right? So, what has changed with social media first was the access that we had to a huge amount of information. And now with AI, the scale and the speed at which these frames are generated and circulated is almost out of control. So, here we're not just talking about journalists or editors making choices. We're talking about algorithms optimizing content in real time based mostly on engagement metrics, right? So, those metrics often reward not the truth necessarily, but what's emotionally triggering, what's outrageous, what's fear, what creates fear and division. So we risk ending up with a lot of stories that aren't framed for clarity and depth. They are framed to perform, right? So, when profit comes in a way of truth and information, um, we risk that these algorithmically amplified frames will start to feel like a consensus, like the reality that's out there. So, we think we're seeing the full story, but in reality, we're seeing the version that is more likely to keep us scrolling. So, you know, as someone who studied media narratives for such a long time, from privacy to disinformation to gender bias, um, I find this very concerning. It's very scary, because when frames are created, when they are reinforced, um, it becomes harder for people to take the time to be, to put their academic hat on and think, wait, whose perspective is this? What perspectives are we missing here? Is this the full picture? And if that critical distance is lost, which often happen when we emphasize speed, then we risk normalizing distortions that can shape the public opinion, that can shape policy, that can shape social behavior in perhaps very harmful ways. So we need to be very careful with that.
Hi, if you're enjoying this episode, if this podcast has sparked something in you, made you think differently, or simply kept you company today, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. It doesn't cost anything, but it means the world to us. Your support helps us reach more people and continue investing in content that inspires, informs, and gives it back to you. We appreciate your support. Thank you. In that regards, do you see any AI tool that can help fact checking? Because I think this is, we're overwhelmed with information, like you mentioned, right? And there's basically you're already overwhelmed, barely any time to just go and I mean, I guess most people don't even fact check. So it is expected what they're getting had some sort of fact checking. But maybe we could use technology also on our on to try to mitigate some of this fake news and everything else that is manipulated, or all these constructed frames that we get impacted every day on social media, or like have you experienced any AI tool that can help with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky environment because the detection tools are there, and they are trying to keep up the pace with the pace of the creation of deepfakes and all that. So there are tools that are evolving and trying to help us in that direction. And I think that I mean, it's complicated because AI, the speed of the advancement in artificial intelligence and the creation of deepfakes and all that, is what most um, users, I guess, keep focusing on. We don't really have a strong ethical framework to think about the other component, the importance of these detection tools. um, I think, though, that the bigger problem there is not just that deep fake will fool everyone, because I'm sure that we'll be able to create detection tools that are good enough, and perhaps media literacy, digital literacy, that will help us to understand and to detect what's fake but from what's not. But I think what's really at risk here is that they the deepfakes and artificial intelligence and all these issues will convince us to trust nothing, right? So the time that we spend thinking and talking about what's fake is in a way shifting our attention away from what's true on the one hand, and on the other hand, that we are kind of entering a credibility vacuum environment where doubt itself becomes the weapon. So when any video can be faked, any real footage becomes suspicious. So we're not focusing on whether we can figure out whether that's true or not. We are really uh, putting trust at risk. And, so if you think about the foundational pillar of democracy, that's trust is right there. So public trust is what allows our institutions to function. It's what allows journalism to hold power accountable and citizens to engage meaningfully. So we can develop detection tools, but deep fakes threaten um, evidence itself, and they are not just distorting information; they are distorting belief. So if we're losing the ability to discern what's real or to believe that there is something real out there, then we're not going to be able to act collectively anymore, and it's we're losing the glue to our democratic system. So the detection tools are a band-aid,
Hmm.
but we need a foundational cure there.
Just to double down a little bit on deep fakes, because I think we're just scratching the surface on how harmful
Mhm.
and this technology can increase like scams globally, and it's really fast as well. So I've heard some discussions of, I think you touched a little bit about that, that the trust that we had was usually coming from institutions, right? Government, uh, government, yeah, government bodies, or news articles, biggest new articles that you can trust in that information. So I've seen some people discussing that we're gonna reach a point, and I want your opinion on that, where everything, most, maybe 90% of everything is fake, or is trying to deceive you in some way, or trying to frame like a reality doesn't exist, and you can't trust that we're kind of like, we need some solid institutions to actually give us that trust back. And I heard a lot of discussion, especially for fake photos, right? Because before, you could trust that, I don't know, the New York Times, for example, which is like a very, in theory, let's say, a very solid institution, that everything that goes on the cover of that newspaper, you should trust that they fact check, and then it can be sued if they actually write something or publish something that it's untrue, right, or that's not based on facts. But so maybe we're gonna. I don't know if it's gonna be the news that will take that mental. But what is your opinion in regards to that? How do we fight against deep fakes, and how we can regain trust in some institutions, or in somewhere, so we're not completely operating in in a state of fakes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a very complicated um situation and environment for sure, because um there is a lot of power and money involved in there, and the problem with the media is that they have to act quickly and publish to as quickly as possible in order to keep the attention. So when attention is really the what we're trading there, is it's complex to ensure that we deliver information that's fact check, etc. So I think that very important directions are, well, to develop a a more transparent media ecosystem. We need to hold the media accountable. We need to make our voices heard, asking for accountability. And we need more widespread programs and training around media literacy, helping everyone learn how to discern fake and true information. Um, but uh, I think that the focus should be on, ethical training, on developing again, a transparent media ecosystem where we know who's in charge and how the information has been developed, the information has been found, who fact checked um, the information before delivering it. And I mean, we may sacrifice some speed there. We should embrace sacrificing speed. We don't need to be able to access information 24/7. I rather access truth than just constant information.
It's
So
not healthy. It's not healthy to get, especially with the state of media these days, that everything that is controversial will generate more clicks and it will surface in the algorithm like instantaneously. Like, and that by itself it's already coming with a harmful message, because it's, like you mentioned before, it's tapping into emotions. It doesn't necessarily it's conveying the truth, right? Maybe it is, but it might be a distorted version of that to generate more clicks and so on. So it's like it's a rigged system.
mhm.
I heard there was uh, what was the number? I think I've heard some people saying that 80% of the internet already is AI generated. So, which I think is a bit absurd, but I'm not totally. I mean, it with the rate of how you can create content with these things, and now that most of LLMs reached like a cap because they have been trained with the entire human knowledge, at least what is available online. They're already training in synthetic data. So for them to evolve these models, in theory, you need more AI generated data. So I don't think it's that hard to believe, even though it's crazy that 80% of the internet could be online or AI generated. But thinking of that, how do you think that challenges originality and especially human creativity? Because we want to, at least we're trying to focus our content here in the podcast to be more within the creative fields, which are the fields that have been impacted like dramatically in the last couple of years with AI, right? So what do you think about that? How do you think the AI generated content poses a challenge to originality and human creativity?
Oh, that's it keeps me up at night. That there's a growing risk, I believe, that we start mistaking output for insight, and that we conflate novelty with originality. Um, generative AI, is incredibly good at pattern recognition and at remixing existing content into something that looks new, right? Maybe it can surprise some of the readers, it can surprise us at first, yes, but it cannot surprise itself. So, it doesn't grapple with ambiguity, with contradiction, with loss, with the uncertain. Um, and that, I think, is key because real creativity oftentimes stems from those human experiences, from constraint, from vulnerability, frustration, from cultural context, from boredom, from pain. Um, so, it's not just about creating something new, right? Which AI can be great at, like something that looks new. It's about saying something that's insightful, something that's meaningful, something that um, is disruptive sometimes, and something that is situated in a lived perspective. Because you know AI doesn't yet have self to reflect from. So um, there is a flattening of expression. So content generated by AI um, follows or responds to the most statistically likely path, right? Which means that it's optimizing coherence, but doesn't leave room for disruption, for a paradigm shift. So, disruption is exactly where human creativity lives. And creativity is not about refinement and editing. It's about rupture. It's about taking a conceptual detour, about breaking patterns rather than following patterns, or else we'll hear and see and read the same story over and over again. um, there's a lot of research around the importance of boredom, um, because boredom is often what allows these detours, these conceptual detours. When we allow ourselves to be bored, to sit with silence or with uncertainty, that's when we create space for new neural connections, and that's where the disruption and the paradigm shift can happen. And AI by design is created to fill the gaps as quickly as possible, so that it does not tolerate silence or stillness. But that silence and that stillness is exactly where creative thinking can happen. So it's the challenge, I believe, is to create that, to protect those creative spaces where the human element becomes essential, or is again essential, or it used to be. We're not, the risk, what's at stake there is not just um, a couple of papers. It's we are risking to build a culture of expression that's technically polished, that's endlessly generated, but that's emotionally hollow. That doesn't say anything new anymore, and that would be a pretty big price to pay for convenience and for speed. You know, so it's that's the time again to step back and put the academic hat back on again, and ask questions.
It's interesting that you said, like, in the moments that we are more relaxed and thinking about nothing, that creativity comes. And do you have any tips, for example, for people that uses a lot of social media? How do you step back? Like, how do you, like, slow down a little bit? Do you have any tips about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, like tech detox, like allow for a pause, like turn the cell phone off, turn the devices off, put them, store them in the drawer so that they're not on the desk. Um, they're out of sight, and go for a walk, or allow ourselves to force ourselves, not allow, I guess, force ourselves to be away from any technological device, because that's exactly where creativity happened. And that was already a huge concern way before AI, with smartphones and with social media, that you know uh, deprive us from that ability to be with ourselves. And it's not just about creativity and about the creation of new neural connections when we're bored, but there's also like the ability to reflect on the self, the ability to develop the what we call the capacity for solitude, which is the ability to be with ourselves without ever feeling alone. So it's technology is definitely creating a society that's really fragile. because we don't have the time to nurture our sense of self, and we don't have the time to nurture our creativity.
I think the classroom is not immune about this all these
Mhm.
issues. And how are you seeing like AI affect how students are learning, expressing themselves, and doing the assignments?
Oh, it's that's there's a lot there. It's, let's say, it's definitely a mixed bag. On the one hand, AI tools, I will give you that they can be helpful. They can, scaffold learning. They can offer feedback. They can help brainstorm if checked. Because we have to be very cautious. They We need to remember that those tools are built on data sets and algorithms that aren't always or ever neutral, and that reflect cultural, linguistic, and ideological biases, uh, often in ways that aren't immediately obvious to the users or ever obvious sometimes. So, um, when students do use AI or rely on AI for explanations or summaries, um, they may end up absorbing perspectives that, if we're lucky, they just lack nuances. But worse, they can be inaccurate, they can be biased, they can be discriminatory. So, AI can speed up access to information, but we need to ask, what kind of information are we accessing, right? Is that, trustworthy information? Is that balance? What voices does it center? What can be left out? So this is one component. Um, the other one, again, very scary, is the temptation to outsource thinking, again, because we are not bored, we don't have the time to, we have the need for constant stimulation, the dopamine circle. And if students learn, or try to lean too heavily on AI to generate responses, then they miss that, what we call that productive struggle, which is the intellectual friction that leads to frustration first, but then when we go over the mountain, then it leads to real understanding, right? Because that's when we wrestle with an idea, that when we revise a sentence a million times, when we reconsider a source, that's when learning really happens. So if we rely on AI too much, we have an outcome that looks fluent, right? Because AI is pretty good at mimicking fluency, but it cannot teach uncertainty. It cannot teach the critical doubt. It cannot teach ethical reflection, and those are foundational aspects to growing and learning, and to education. So I think it's important that everybody understands that um, technology is a tool, and we can use it for good or for bad. But it's important that we learn not just to use technology, but to question it. And that's, I think, asking the right question, and wondering whether the information that we get is valuable and trustworthy, but also engaging with that productive struggle, and learning when it is the time to turn off that technology, and to turn off that personal assistant, to let our brain plug in again.
Yeah, and do you think the research articles are becoming weaker, or do you think the potential of using AI to enhance some of the aspects? I think you already answered a little bit, but I would like to hear a bit.
I think the literature reviews part of the research isn't necessarily weaker. We need to double fact check it, but it's, AI can be good at regurgitating information that's already there, um, paraphrasing and all that. It's not always good at that, but there's a potential, I guess. But what AI is defying is the ability to think something different, to think something that doesn't seem to make sense with the current state of things, like the idea of disruption isn't there. AI is kind of like a student that can replicate what's already been done, but that cannot move a step forward into questioning it. So if we rely on AI too much for research, then we're not going to go anywhere. There's not going to be a paradigm shift ever. We're just going to keep regurgitating the same information in apparently new ways that are not necessarily new. They're just paraphrases of what's already out there.
Yeah. And how do you help your students to remain like engaged or not overwhelmed by these new tools? How do you do that?
It's important to uh, remember how we used to do things before these new tools were around, and to occasionally or frequently have the um, power or strength to step back and turn it off, right? Because of course AI is not going to go anywhere, so I'm not one of those people that say students shouldn't use it, we need to move away from AI, et cetera, et cetera. I think that we are always going to be living in an environment where AI is going to be present. So we need to find the literacy and the tools that will help us to use it, to understand how to use it properly, and even more importantly, to understand when to turn it off, and how to step away from it, and how to still um, understand that humanity and that our brain need to function independently from artificial intelligence. Because if we rely too much on it, then it's we're not going to be able to have any creative thinking anymore. We're not going to be able to do anything new. We're just going to be performing something that's already been performed a million times.
Do you have any framework, or when do you know is the time to just take a step back and okay, let's just put these tools aside, and then because I think a lot of I've been reading a lot about essential skills to, and we've been talking about this here in the podcast as well, that to help people navigate these massive disruption times, right, with AI advancing, and there's a lot of, when you expect that AI can execute a lot of things, let's say, or output a lot of things, then curation becomes really important. But curation also comes with expertise and with critical thinking, creative thinking, strategic thinking. So, how do you see? Is there any framework that you try to use, or is there some techniques, or how do you? When do you know is the time to just take a step back and okay, let's look this critically, and how often do you do that as well?
Thinking about it, like when I talk to my students, and when I try to help others or myself as well learn about what's a healthy way to use AI. Well, I emphasize the importance of curiosity over fear, right? Um, but I emphasize also the importance of critical curiosity. So I don't think that we need to master every AI tool overnight. Um, but we need to understand enough to ask meaningful questions, and we need to learn about how these systems work, what they're trained on, what they build, who built them, what assumptions may be baked into that. And so we need to keep up with the tools, but also interrogating the narratives and the power structures behind the tools. But, I also tell my students that the real edge, again, will not come from how fast they can use AI. It will come from knowing when and how not to use it. So when they need to refine a paragraph, maybe they can use AI. But when they need to generate purpose, to think about the goal of a specific campaign that they're designing, or when they're thinking about the voice of the brand that they're putting together, that they're developing, I want them to understand that AI may be able to mimic tone, but it doesn't understand context. So when they have to, they have to step back into it to train their own AI assistant, if they use so, in the understanding of context. And I think that the real value when it comes to communication is not about assembling words, right? It's about shaping meaning, it's about shaping intention, it's about shaping ethical impact. So, I think that the time to turn it off and take a break away from it is when we need to work on our curiosity, when we see that our curiosity is going away because we have all the answers. And I also think that when we see that the healthy skepticism is going away, that's another time where we need to step away from AI. So, ultimately we may use AI, but we need to not to refrain from outsourcing our judgment to it. So we need to build our own literacy, not just in a technical term, not just to learn how to use a tool, but we need to build our own understanding of the cultural context. We need to learn about ethical implications. We need to focus on the features that make us deeply human, such as, again, creativity and empathy and emotional intelligence, etc. So stepping away from it is important when we feel that those human features are being compromised.
And what ethical considerations do you believe are being overlooked in how AI is integrated communication and media today?
Oh, there's so much. A big problem there is that we're placing the focus on innovation versus ethical development, right? So there are many components there that become problematic. Consent and accountability, for sure, are two major gaps. Because we still don't really have clear norms around whose data is being used and in training the systems, or whether individuals should have a say in how their digital likeness, their voice, their creative work is repurposed and used to train these systems. And copyright law is struggling to catch up, obviously. So, questions around intellectual ownerships uh, and authorship become increasingly murky there, especially when AI generated content is built on the creative labor of others, right? So this raises huge concerns about authorship, about credit, about control. But again, I'm afraid that it's almost too late to build a system that protects those very important values. Another issue is privacy, obviously, that always, often at least, gets minimized for convenience and for other priorities. If we think about AI tools, we should know that they rely on huge amount of data, right? And much of the data they rely on is scraped from the internet without consent, taken out of context. And once the data is in the model, it's hard to trace. So, I mean, let alone remove. So we need to be asking where whose data is being used, for what purposes, and who profits from data use as well. Because when we overlook these questions, then we risk normalizing a system that commodify personal informations in the name of innovation. You know, I am all for innovation, but an ethically sound one. And then, I mean, there's another. I could speak for hours probably. So, but another component there is that of influence, um, because AI. We're talking about framing earlier. AI is not just distributing content; it's shaping perception. Because when algorithms decide what we see, what we don't, and how content is framed, um, they're actively influencing how we understand the world, right? What decisions we take, which direction we follow, who we vote for. There's a huge responsibility there, and yet we have largely outsourced that responsibility to opaque systems that are optimized for engagement, for profit, and for whatever creates likes or shares, or whatever draws the attention. So we need to be honest, I think, as a society, about those trade-offs. And we need to be more intentional in how we design and govern these tools. What are the values that we build into the systems? Because it's that's going to be what the output is, our society of tomorrow.
So if you can think about one good way to use AI in communication and media, and one bad way, would be those two?
So, I mean, one good way could be as a personal assistant in a way, right? So there is a lot of automated work that doesn't necessarily need a lot of thinking, and that our intern could carry over, right? So AI, I believe, can be good in automating certain tasks, but there always need to be a fact check, and like someone who spends the human time to actually make sure that the intern did everything that they were supposed to, and that there isn't any missing information or any missing content in there. So automated tasks can be sorted out through using AI, but um, um, with keeping a grain of salt there. Um, what cannot be automated is creation, is disruption, is creative thinking, is the ability to think out of the box, and the ability to create directions, to set goals, and to develop objectives for, I'm thinking if we're developing a campaign, well, AI can automate, you know, the smaller tasks, but there needs to be human creativity that looks at the big picture, that sees what's missing and what's not, that understands the context, that studies the audiences, and that creates the content for those audiences in a creative way. Um, I don't think that AI will ever be able to mimic lived experiences and, authentic human voice. So I think that that's where communicators need to spend their time, in focusing on creativity and maintaining authenticity and intentionality.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and yeah, I think it's super aligned with what we always talk in the podcast. Because the human creativity is not going to be like put it down, So that's the key. And then talking about that, like, do you have any advice would you give like to people working with AI in communication and in the media, and how to navigate this constant changing environment?
Um, I think that, key is, I think, moving away from asking, can we, to asking, should we, you know? And I think that, we should do that early and not after the fact, because we're racing ahead with powerful tools, but our ethical frameworks are not keeping pace. And, I think we need to start normalizing the decision to pause and to consider impact over innovation. I'm all for innovation, but I think that impact is something that we need to keep focus on. If when I think about AI communication strategy, I mean, imagine if every AI driven communication strategy had a section of unintended consequences. Who might be harmed, who might be misrepresented, who might be left out. Um, so that kind of intentionality, I think, could reshape how we build and how we use these systems. And I think that to make that possible, we need to invest in ethical training and ethical thinking before innovation. And that's not just for engineers and developers, but for communicators, for marketers, for educators, for policymakers, for users, for everyone. Everyone in shaping messages with artificial intelligence need to have a foundational understanding of bias, on privacy, of consent, digital responsibility. So I think that ethical literacy needs to be part of the skill set there, and not just a side note. Um, and if we work on that, I think that's how we can ensure, or at least try to ensure, that AI serves people rather than profit.
Awesome. I think, yeah, we reached the end of the episode. Thank you. It was really nice conversation, very interesting. There's a lot of interesting topics. Where can people find you online?
Well, I'm always I'm not very active on social media, but they can connect with me. They can find my profile at National University. Um, so I'm on their website. Um, I can share the information to the link. Again, I teach at the Master in Strategic Communications at National University, and I do research. I publish articles in different journals. Um, but I don't have a social media presence. That's because I stepped back from that
Makes sense. Just you're not just you're actually acting on your advice as well.
That's right. That's right. But I'm yeah, I'll share a link to the National University site where I can be found. There's my email, my phone number, everything is there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we can put it
nice.
on the show notes.
Absolutely.
You have a children's book, isn't it? So if you wanna share here, we can put the link on the show notes. So
Yeah, yeah, I'll share that as well. Yeah. That was a fun project uh that took me away from academic thinking for a little bit and allow me to think visually, um,
yeah,
with a child's brain. It's a good advice as well to
what is the
activate
book
her.
about? Yeah,
It's about the power of discovery through adventure and traveling, um, and the ability to learn something new through the journey, and not just when you get there.
nice. That's super important.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's all about the journey, never about the
Yeah,
destination.
yeah. We have
That's
the tendency of thinking, okay, when I reach that, that's the end, or I don't know, I'll be happy in that moment. And actually, the journey is the way, isn't it? So that's perfect.
Yeah, yeah. That's I have two young kids, and many people say that that's what children teach, to be in the present and to understand that the journey is really the output.
nice.
Great,
Final,
great.
philosophical, a good philosophical way to end.
Definitely.
But thank you, Doctor, to be able to talk to us, and then was really nice.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about these very important issues.